Everybody. Well, welcome to the Uber to the Pits podcast, and I am happy to be joined today by none other than CJ Wilson. CJ, thanks for joining us.
Here I am, driving around in my desk. Like,
There you
this
go.
is a typical setup.
So I know we're a motorsports podcast, and I met CJ a couple weeks ago at Laguna Seca while he was up there for a track day event that I was at as well.
WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca. I think, we got to.
Exactly. The penultimate track in the U.S., in my opinion, my favorite track, my home away from home. Now, CJ, let's talk a little bit. How'd you get involved in motorsports in the first part? I know when you and I were talking a little bit at the track, it goes back to when you and I were both little kids.
Yeah. I think, motorsports is one of those things, just like any other sport. You follow a team or you get attached to it at a young age. And, for me, my dad was on a midget dirt track team as like a pit crew guy or something. And so we used to go to Saugus or Ascot or, Riverside or wherever there was a race. And on weekends, Friday nights, just watch these dudes, run dirt oval races and watch the Destruction Derby and all the weird side shows that would happen.
Yeah.
I'd watch, this is back in the 80s, we'd watch like Speed Vision on TV, or you watch, the IndyCar race.
The good old days of Dave Despain and.
Yeah, you'd watch the in the 80s, that's IndyCar was really hot, right? You had Lyondike, you had Mears, you had Little Al, you had all these Andretti, all these relatively big name, big personality guys in the sport. And as racing sort of evolved from Group C racing in IMSA with like the 962 and stuff like that, and then you'd see like the guys, even like Nigel Mansell or some of these other dudes came over from Formula One to race IndyCar.
Yeah.
It was like, whoa, okay, IndyCar, this is the thing. They're doing 230 around an oval next to the bricks or whatever, like kind of sketchy. But that was kind of the formative age for me. So I'd watch baseball, I'd watch racing, watch some NBA games and stuff like that. I was a Lakers fan growing up. So it was kind of hard not to root for Porsche because in the 962s they were smoking everybody. Yeah. And then in the 90s they had the 964 RSR, the 993 RSR, the 993 GT2. So they made some cool cars. And then the 993 GT1.
That's my favorite right there.
Exactly. And so, and they were obviously very successful during the whole process. So it was an element of their success was fun to watch because you'd see how they would try to like evolve and win the races. Now, at the same time, I was watching a lot of Formula One. And then in the, mid 90s, I guess, Ayrton Senna passed away live on television during a race. He died, crashed into a wall. And I was kind of like, okay, I can't really watch Formula One for a while. It sort of took me out of the Formula One market, I guess you would call it. But I didn't ever do any real racing. I was just a fan of cars. I just thought cars were cool, read the car magazines, all that stuff. And then, I lived in Huntington Beach, which is Surf City, USA. So you would go to the beach on, in the summertime, ride a bodyboard, ride a surfboard, whatever, go body surf, eat a hot dog, spill some lemonade on yourself. That was my life, sports and going to the beach. And then racing was like the one thing that I really liked watching. But for me, it was more about like, I want to drive one of those things. I really want to go fast. I want to see what it's like. I mean, they look so cool with the wings and everything. And I'd read all these articles about them and watch videos and stuff like that. And I was really blown away by the, the technology that they were pulling out at the time, like self-leveling suspensions, turbochargers, and then obviously the 90s was like automatic seatbelts. And I was like, so, I guess when I got a little bit of juice, started playing baseball and then got some cash, I got a 993S for myself. And then the next cool car I got was a 993 Turbo. And then I started doing track days. So at the time I was living in Texas, so there's no beach to go visit. And this guy goes, I was at this place called Roof Auto Center in Dallas, and that's where I would get my car serviced up in like Addison or, north of like Denton. No, not Denton, Denton's too far north, but it's Addison, just north of like the Dallas Galleria. And this guy goes, bro, you want to come to the track? I'm like, there's a track? And he's like, yeah. It's like, it's like an hour away. It's out in Granbury, middle of nowhere. But yeah, I've got this race car. You can ride shotgun. We'll like do a whole day. And I was like, I can ride in a race car? like on a real track, and he had a super gnarly 944 turbo with like slicks and everything like
Oh,
that, full on
nice.
racing. And then we went through a couple turns or whatever, warming the car up, and then he kind of like got the car, like the tires kind of going, and then he just grenades the brakes going into this one car, and I was like, and like literally wasn't prepared for it, and like doinked my head off like the crossbar on the roof or something like that, and I was like, okay, that's it, race cars, let's do it. Like, fucking, what do I got to do, And that was kind of the whole thing. So I at that point started doing track days, and then I did the Skip Barber Racing School in the Formula cars, the Mazda. I did the Miatas, then I did the Formula cars, then I did some SCCA racing and MX5 Cup cars, and then I did some enduro racing, and then it was like Formula car school at Jim Russell, which was Sonoma, in the F3 cars. Crashed one, didn't die, thought it was awesome. I was like, oh my God, carbon fiber is the best thing ever, and so is downforce. And yeah, it was crazy. And then that was during the sort of 2007 to 2009 phase. And at that point, I was actually doing all the Skip Barber winter racing. And the kids that I was racing against at that point are all now in IndyCar or NASCAR or ELMS or ALM or IMSA or whatever. And I'm like, man, I remember when I used to race with that kid. He was really cool. I stay in touch with a lot of them.
And I'm sure a lot of them were like, wait, I'm watching him on TV play baseball, but yet I just raced against him.
Right. Well, they were kids. So some of these guys were like 13, 14, 15 years old. So I kind of felt like a creepy scout. I was like, hey, you're really good one day. Like, stay off drugs and don't get any girls pregnant, and you can go race, but Spencer Piggott, Tristan Nunez, David Chang, who won Le Mans a couple years ago. I was like racing with all these guys. They were all the guys that I was racing with, and we were all buddies. It was like all fun, and it was cool. It was competitive. Trent Hinman, who actually won the GS a couple times in IMSA. That was the class that I was in for these kids. So that I was racing on the East Coast and the West Coast of the Skip Barber winter series, because I couldn't do obviously the regular season stuff because that was during baseball. So that was challenging.
Now, when you started doing the Skip Barber one, when did it become placed in your contract that there's going to be no racing?
Oh,
was it?
It was always that you weren't supposed to do it, but I was a relief pitcher, so it's like, whatever. He's a relief pitcher. Then I became a starting pitcher, and the Rangers were like, "Whoa, racing? What kind of car are you racing?" And I'm like, "Oh, here's a photo of my car," and they're like, "It doesn't have a roof," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's a F3 car." And they're like, "You can't do that. No, you have to stop that." And I was like, "Okay, what about this one?" They're like, "Well, that one just has a windshield, but still no roof." I'm like, it's only got 180 horsepower. It's a Miata. Come on,
There's a roll cage. See, that's my roof.
Yeah, it's got a roll cage. We're fine. I got arm tethers, so I can't, yeah, they were really not into that, because at that point, then my salary went from 6 figures to 7 figures, and then it was like, banned. So I still did it, but I would only wasn't doing as many races and not doing as many, racing schools or whatever. So I started kind of focusing on street cars and like collecting cars and stuff like that. And that's when I started the race team, So I started the race team right before the 2010 season. And that was MX5 Cups. And then eventually we went from MX5 Cups to won the championship there, to the IMSA ST and won the championship there. And then we went to IMSA GT4 and then finished second to Multimatic. And then eventually went to GTD in the Acura NSX. So we went like up a pretty good progression, and we're on a pretty good path. But then I retired from baseball, and I was like, hey, it's time for me to race. I want to go race now. And I've learned a lot about the business of racing by being in conversations with Michelin, Continental, Pirelli, Mobil 1, Total, Alpine Stars, whatever. I have all these conversations with, different brands. Maybe, hey, we'll do some TV stuff and blah, 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 blah. At the time my star was rising, with baseball, and I was making more every year and getting more contracts. I had like a Head & Shoulders, like hair commercial contract, and all this stuff. So we had like a Head & Shoulders Miata in ST, in racing, But I think what was unique for me was that I saw the business for what it was, which was a lot of people trying to put the pieces around and like rearrange everything so that we can get a car on the track, and a lot of it requires, customers and clients that are willing to pay to go race. And, a series like MX5 Cup was fantastic for that because the cost associated was low enough that it was so much cheaper to race, and it'd be like really like there on the same weekends as the big race, but you're running at 9 a.m. instead of going to like an SCCA club race in a Porsche Cup car or some like cool vintage car and spending all this money on like a gnarly car. You were spending the money on the travel and the racing. And I think people saw that, especially businessmen, because they're like, oh, this is a cool event. Like I can race. Then this dude shows up and we can sit there and talk, and I can introduce him to like, Marino Franchitti, and he's racing this prototype, and like, it's going to blow his mind, like carbon fiber everywhere. And then we're going to sign a deal. And like, that's the concept behind all business to business that happens at the track, is that you as the driver or the team owner or whatever are going to facilitate things happening in this kind of utopian, fun, loud, unique, and then cool access thing. And then that's how deals are going to get done. And then you're going to get funded based on that. But it's not always that simple. There's a lot of things that pop up. People crash cars. That sucks. Sometimes the guy that you're counting on to find the money or pay the money ends up costing you money because he crashes, and then he's not competitive. And then you have to figure out like a way of like client services. So then is it Marriott or Hilton level hospitality, or is it
Best Western?
Yeah. Or is it like, like the running the racing team is like all these choices, right? Okay. Are we going to have this super premium, like amazing experience that anybody that pays $1 to us gets access to this amazing thing? Or is it like, we're going to scale it based on what we're getting? You know what I mean? And like, are we going to commit basically and jump in and cannonball in and then trust ourselves to fill in the budget? Or are we going to sort of budget as we go and sort of stay in lockstep as you increase it? And I think that's a very difficult challenge for any business, like a pizza place or a dry cleaner or a hotel or a race team. That's just running a business. And I will say that Andrus, who ran the team for me for about 10 years or 9 years, I guess, because I sold the team in 2018, 19. That's when it sort of became. That's when it went from CJ Wilson Racing to Gradient Racing, which is their new moniker. Andrus did a fantastic job as a race team runner. But my focus now is like, okay, well, I've done the sort of business owner, assemble some stuff, blah blah blah. That's cool. But now I want to be a race car driver and I want to race. And my personal racing means more to me than anybody else because it's my money and it's my career, and I have a window that I have to sort of sneak some results in before I get too old or become like a joke, like some of the guys.
We won't name any names, but
yeah.
So you've spent all this time for the drivers that are coming up now and the business to business marketing themselves. How important is it to really be able to go in front of somebody and say, hey, this is who I am, this is what I can offer, can we talk? Or do people still too much rely on like, you know what, I'm gonna just let my racing speak for itself and I'm gonna let somebody come talk to me?
Yeah, I mean, there's maybe 20 or 40 people in the world that I'm gonna let my racing talk for myself, like that actually works for.
Yeah.
Those are the people that we know their names already. Vettel, Raikkonen, I don't know, Hamilton, right? Guys that like Hamilton, perfect example, is semi like discovered as like a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or whatever. Then at that point, he gets signed by McLaren as a development driver as a 13-year-old. Yeah. So if you're 17 and McLaren hasn't signed you and Williams hasn't signed you, well, then they're not going to. Okay.
Learn how to bring money to the table.
There you go. And I have this conversation a lot with people because they say, oh, you've done this, that, and the other. I'm like, well, listen, I was really good at baseball, and me being really good at baseball allowed me to have access to more people to be interesting, right? So like to have an interesting story that I could connect to a manufacturer, whether it was Bentley. At one point, like Bentley was like, we really like you. like, here's a car, like, go just drive it around and like tell us how you like it, just like like a journalist, you know.
Yeah.
And I would get cars like that, and I always, you know, everything you can do, you just say yes to. If you're up and coming, you say yes to everything. Perfect example of that is Billy Johnson, who does, you know, he's been a factory driver for Ford. He's also an advocate for certain like aftermarket brands. He is a development driver for road cars. He also does articles and stunt driving, you know, for like magazines or, you know, websites or whatever. So you need to have 10 or 12 different skills if you're going to be like a professional race car driver now these days. So Mark Miller, who raced for me for a long time, he coaches Ferrari Challenge.
Past guest on the show as well.
Okay, yeah. So he's been a racing instructor, a kart instructor, a kart dealer, a vendor. You know what I mean? He goes to the PRI show every year in Indianapolis, and he's like working to try to get these business relationships together because he has this network. You know,
Yeah.
Your network. Someone sent this to me on LinkedIn, and I was like, "That's the cheesiest thing ever," and I'm not going to give you credit by name, but that's good. Your network is your net worth. And I was like, this sounds like some internet guru trying to sell cardboard boxes on like, you know, subscription. But it's real though. So the network that you have, that you create as you're ascending the ranks, whether it's competitors, whether it's vendors, people that own tracks, people that manage tracks, insurance companies, tire companies, brake companies. A lot of these companies and these tracks and stuff, they're going to be around. So if you're 15, 12, 10, 7, whatever, you need to like be associated with as many of these people as possible. You need to understand that, you know, maybe it doesn't end up with you winning the Monaco Grand Prix. It ends up with you getting a job on Top Gear like Chris Harris, being extremely interesting, fun to listen to, able to slide cars around, and that's your professional job. But Chris also races with Garage 59 with one of the owners of one of those cars. So Chris has done a lot of racing over the years as a result of him being incredibly famous as a car guy. But he's not like one of these guys that was like a go-kart winger and then went straight into that, you know. Yeah. And that's the best part about sports cars, unlike Formula One. Like, I'm 39 and a half ish, and I still have a future where I can still race for another 10 or 15, maybe 18 years competitively before I'm really like too old, you know. And as long as my vision stays good, which is really good, you know, it was always really good as a player. If my vision gets a little bit worse and I have normal vision, I'll still be able to race. But if you already wear glasses and you're like 30, you're probably going to be blind by the time you're 50 and not be able to race like at night at Le Mans in the rain. That's not going to work. So there's a lot of different skills to develop. But, you know, that's where you have to be honest, and you just have to say, just like you're building a player on, you know, like a fantasy player on a football game on Xbox or whatever. Okay, I can go this fast. I can avoid crashing. I can help engineer the suspension for the car because my feedback will make the car better. I can be a good teammate and coach my teammate to get them faster. I make good passes, not bad passes. I don't send the car off and lose 30 seconds in the enduro. You know, I can watch video on YouTube and then hop in and do a really fast lap on the third lap of practice instead of needing 6 practice sessions and not being fast till Sunday. I can conduct an interview. I can talk about products. I can, you know, Google like a shoe cleaner and be like, Kiwi shoe cleaner is absolutely the best to keep you running in top shape. You know, like that's what you have to be willing to do, all that stuff if you're going to make it as a professional race car driver these days. There's very few people that, and I would say basically IndyCar drivers are the only guys that don't have to do that now. Like the top.
I mean, there's a few of the top level sports car drivers, you know, in the DPIs and even the, you know, GTLMs that, you know, are still paid drivers. And I think even 3/4 of the field of IndyCar drivers, some of those guys are just okay, and then the other have to bring money to the table as well.
Yeah. But that's the thing, though, is, you know, you have guys, even in Formula One, you know, you have guys that are there because they bring a Telmex sponsorship or a beer sponsorship or a, you know, whatever. And, like, it is what it is, you know. Like, the racing, the only type of racing that's actually fair is running, because that's the only thing that doesn't actually require any equipment, right? You and me right now racing to the lamppost. Boom, go. Like that's
But
fair.
I want to add 5 pounds of BOP to you just to make it even.
Yeah, to make it even more fair, right? And see, then that's where this whole thing is. Racing is not really a meritocracy the way actual like ball and stick sports are. Like let's say hockey, you could grow up in Canada, skate around on a lake, have an amazing backhand, and just be able to skate backwards and just be incredible. And then you get a 10-year contract with the Capitals or the Blackhawks or whatever. Like that's possible. Like that's a Disney story. The Art of Racing in the Rain story is very fictional, where someone like who has a life similar to what my life is now, meaning like I'm just a Joe that works at a car dealership. Forget my baseball stuff in the past because I don't do it anymore. So my audience is XYZ from Twitter. I have this many followers on Instagram. If I get into somebody else's race car, I'm either going to go fast or I'm not going to go fast. It's binary. So what value do I bring to a team? If a team wants me, they want my money, they want me to pay. And if I'm landing sponsorships, then that's different. Then that's me being a salesperson and then landing the eyeballs. Everybody that's doing marketing is you're marketing for cash transactions or you're marketing for eyeballs. And you have to figure out why are people going to care. Like the women racing right now actually have a huge leg up on everybody because there's so few of them that all of us look the same, right?
Yeah.
Like I look like every racer guy, right? Like I could like if you don't know who I am and I walk into a room, someone could be like, that's Mark Webber, and I could be like, oh, good night, mate, and then they could be like, oh, that's Matt Bell, and I could be like, what's up, dude, and they could be like, oh, that's Drake Kemper, and they'd be like, hey, what's up, and like nobody knows who any of us are as racers, right? Because we're not like really household names, right? Now, what I'm saying by that is that you could have a guy that's a Formula One driver or a Le Mans winner, like Nico Hulkenberg, right? Nico Hulkenberg, like if he came over to IMSA, would probably be like the shit, and everybody would be like, damn, Nico Hulkenberg's here, amazing. But like in Formula One, he was there for 10 years and never won a race. So it's difficult because, then like, is that guy willing to then run this other series? And I think that's part of the hard thing too, is because you have NASCAR, IndyCar, Formula One, Le Mans Prototype, GTE Pro, GTE AM, and then like there's guys like Patrick Long, for instance, who has won everything, right? He's won everything there is to win as an American sports car driver. But because he's got such a great relationship with Porsche puts him in a GT AM car so he can help a guy like me or a Patrick Dempsey or somebody like that go in, because then Patrick Long becomes an unfair advantage in a GT AM car, if that makes sense. So like a guy like Billy Johnson, who's running GT Pro, and then he's running in like GT4, he's obviously an overdog for a GT4 race. You know what I mean? Just like Patrick Long would be an overdog in a GT4 race,
Which is like it's just like Michael Cooper now racing GT4 with Flying Lizard and Black Dog.
Right. But Michael Cooper has to do that. He was also in that Skip Barber series with us, but he always ran the Miatas. He never ran the Formula cars.
Yeah.
It's too buff, too much shoulder. But like Michael Cooper was an incredible driver. As a young kid, he was totally focused, totally kick ass, whatever. But he was running Cadillacs a couple years ago for the factory team, right? So, but if Cadillac decides, we don't want to do a program anymore, or Dodge does the same thing with the Viper, like they did when Riley was smoking everybody in those. It's like, then that's it, Then they pull the plug on the program, and then, like Billy Johnson was Ford GT guy. Now he's like, all right, well, I'll do some other stuff now. So he's going to run some Mercedes stuff and whatever. And everybody is like in that sports car world. That everyone's kind of in that mix. Everyone's in that same pot of granola that says, okay, I'm going to scoop a couple drivers up. And the reason why they want some guy versus another guy, it doesn't come down to this guy ran a faster lap on this day. That's it. It doesn't come down to that. It comes down to like 10 or 20 different things. So if you want to drive and you want to be a real driver, then you have to have all those tools in your tool belt that make you marketable, coachable, able to coach other people. And, you also have to be willing to, I don't want to say this like in a negative way, but you have to kind of bury your pride to the point where it's like, if someone's willing to pay you to do a lesser series, you should do it on the side. Like just, and there's
absolutely. And, that I've talked to, like I said, Willie T. Ribs,
Yeah.
Why am I
Willits is
drawing a
the
blank on
best.
his? Oh yeah, Tommy Kendall, Lawson Auschenbach, Mark Miller, Jason Hart, all those guys said, whatever comes up, go drive it.
Yep.
Because you never know what type of car is going to give you that a little bit of advantage in the next series you race in.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, because if your ego's too big to say, oh, I won't run a TCR car because it's front wheel drive. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, Miss Thing, no TCR cars for you then. But if someone's willing to pay you to be the fast driver in their TCR team, then you should do it. It's not racing against the DPIs. Like you can still do a DPI race after you race TCR,
I mean,
like on the same weekend.
my buddy Michael Lewis races for Brian Herta Motorsports in their TCR and their Hondas.
Yeah.
And he went from racing GT3 in Pirelli World Challenge to racing a TCR car.
Yep.
And, winning championships there. I mean, Colton Herta was running the TCR car a couple of years ago, and now he's winning IndyCar races.
Right. Yeah. A racer's a racer, and you have to always keep that in your head. I think some of the guys, they think that the pot of gold is a little bit bigger than it really is. And the problem is racing is so expensive that the only people making money are the people that are like selling fuel, at the end of the day. Because and like even the tire people, they've got to throw tires away, and you would think actually the brake companies have to be killing it because you can't not slow down. You need brakes, okay? But you have companies like Dallara that's like makes all the IndyCar chassis, right?
Yeah.
All carbon fiber, all this stuff. They're an Italian company. So like, okay, what if they run out of chassis because of COVID? They can't build more chassis. Like, what do you do, right?
Exactly.
So there's all these different elements and angles that happen that are somewhat unpredictable because you don't really know at what time that those politics or those conditions are going to change. It's like racing in Europe. Sometimes it might just start raining. You don't know. So you have to figure out a way to, as a driver, be as neutral as possible with as many things. If you say, oh, I'll never race a Lexus, they suck. And then like all of a sudden they want you on their team. You're like, don't look at my tweets. Let me just delete this really quick. Lexus, yay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can't, you have to be apolitical like that. And that's really hard. Unless you're with a company like Porsche or maybe Honda, I guess, where they have so many ladders, so many rungs on the ladder. If you're a young driver, you win in shifter karts and you kick ass in shifter karts, you get a young driver shootout kind of thing with Porsche. And then you could win a scholarship to run the GT3 Cup program in IMSA. And if you win that, then you get some other advanced thing there, and then you go to doing the next thing, and then you're a junior driver or whatever. And eventually you become a factory driver. There's like one or two kids in the world that get that every year, like one or two that win that junior driver thing.
Yeah.
They're from New Zealand, they're from Germany, they're from California, they're from Mexico, they're from Brazil, they're from Finland. Doesn't matter, but there's two, right? There's probably like two of those kids. Then in Mazda, there's one kid that wins the MX-5 Cup Championship. There's one Skip Barber winner. There's one, Indy Lights winner. And so there's like very few like prize generation things. But it doesn't like if you finish third, like I'm sorry, that's not you don't win. That's it. And that's the toughest part about the sport.
You could win a seat in a race program, but they're going to be asking for money.
Well, if you win in some of the programs, the money to close the gap is so small. Like if you get a free, if you get MX-5 Cup for free,
yeah.
Okay, and then they're like, okay, it's $100,000 to run the season or 130 or whatever. You're in the range there where the money you paid to run the last season that you were in is probably all you have to. You won't have to be. They won't say like, hey, we'll pay half of it. They'll pay probably 80% or 90% of your bills. That doesn't count travel and all that other stuff, but that is what it is. But the problem is that let's say I'm trying to think who builds the like Ligier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Ligier or whatever, Onroque or Crawford or what? Because in America it's Crawford and Ligier are like a partner. But so they build the LMP3 cars, right? But I don't think that the LMP3 championship winner automatically gets to go to Le Mans as a LMP2 driver. You know what I mean? There's like, it doesn't work like that. So, you have to kind of pick the path you want to get on. But you can't do it without money at the end of the day. And so you need relationships. If you don't have the money, you need the relationships. And, it's just like a Kickstarter. Can you get $5 from everybody in your phone? If you can, you'll probably be able to go race. But if you have a hard time asking for money, which, by the way, racing is incredibly selfish. Hey, send me some money and I'm going to go race. It's going to be awesome. Like, it's super funny when you think about it.
Yeah.
But, it's a very internal spiritual quest for someone like me that has already had success somewhere else, that I want to race because I think it's difficult and I want to, like, prove to myself that I can do this at this level.
I mean, but
I took I didn't start, like, doing track days until I was 26 years old. So it's kind of like a lot different situation than Spencer or Trent or Tristan or
but I mean, if you look at other celebrities, like McQueen or Dempsey, Newman, they didn't get involved until racing until later in their years either.
Yeah.
After, whether it was a movie shoot where they had to go do a school, or, a gift like what Dempsey's wife gave him to go do Skip Barber.
Yep.
And, but unfortunately, one of those things is as soon as the needle gets stuck in your arm, it's stuck.
Yeah, then a lot of butterflies and moths start flying out of your wallet. The thing when you have guys like myself, or let's say Michael Fassbender, Dempsey, guys that have, like, I don't know, a little bit of modern notoriety in the field that they're in, right?
Yeah.
Those guys were obviously way more famous as actors than I ever was as a baseball player. But I was the only baseball player that was racing. So then I get thrust into the same conversation in the same places with those guys, and then it becomes this marketable thing. But similar to what you were talking about earlier, you just have to say yes to stuff. You have to show up. You have to be happy to be there. You have to truly be happy, because it's such a privilege when someone gives you the keys to their car and they say, hey, here you go. Bring it back in one piece, please. You know what I mean? And that could be a Miata or a shifter cart or an Indy Lights car or whatever. The driving someone else's car is the end goal. That's the goal, right? Where someone else is saying, hey, dude, go fast, or hey, chica, go rapido in my car and bring it back in one piece, go win a race. It's the best feeling as a team owner to have a professional driver, like when I had Mark and Tyler McQuarrie and Stephen McAleer and Chad McCumbee racing for me, and I could say, guys, go out there and let's win this race. You know what I mean? And then I'd be like, listen, make that pass. Do what you got to do. You're on the radio, and the guy's like, man, this guy's blocking me. And it's like, if you have to make a low percentage, I trust you. You're the professional. Go for it. There's racing is also different because there's races like the 25 Hours of Thunderhill where literally anybody could go. And anybody could race. Like you and me, we need like one more dude, and we need a car, and we have a team right now. Yeah. Like that's it. That's all we need. So we got two Chris's and a whoever, and we're in a Civic, And guess what? We got our NASA licenses. We're racing, and that's as simple as it is. So, and you might have a funny program come out one year where a couple years ago we were racing there, and then like Helio Castroneves was racing in a Honda Fit Z or a CRZ or something like that. And then his teammate like flipped it on the roof. And I was like, I just passed Helio Castroneves. That was awesome. You know what I mean? Because it's like, I'm in an MX-5 and he's in a CRZ. Like I'm in E1, he's in E3. Like, of course, we smoked him. But you can't just go play pickup basketball with LeBron James. You can't just go like shoot hoops at the Staples Center, right? Or you can't just like, hey, Steph, let me throw you some passes, and let me see if you can just hit some fades from the corner.
Exactly.
Racing, you can go to Laguna Seca and you can do a track day in your whatever car you have with Speed Ventures or Speed District or exclusive track days or, Hooked on Driving or whatever, and you can go out there and literally turn laps and I'm in the corkscrew, and that connectivity to the regularity, because everybody drives, right? But when you get in like a race car and you're on the track and you're like on the track and like the real thing, and that's why there's this addiction to it, because everybody feels like, hey, I'm driving, and they watch this guy drive. They see Zanardi pass through the corkscrew or something like that. They're like, I want to do it. I want to send it through the corkscrew, and it's like, no, you don't want to send it through the corkscrew.
No, yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing where racing is like this high level of entry, but once you're there, you're pretty much doing the same thing that anybody else is doing. Like if you're racing in an SCCA 4-hour enduro, that's the same as racing at the Spa WEC race. You know what I mean? It's literally the same. It's not as cool to say that you're doing a 4 hour at Buttonwillow as it would be to say, oh yeah, I'm in the GTLM team with Porsche Factory or whatever. But like, you're making passes, you're getting past, you're managing the car, managing the tires, managing the fuel, doing pit stops. Like you can take it like the World Series or like the Daytona 24, or like Le Mans. And I always did, because I felt like if I don't, then I'm, number one, wasting my time. Number two, risking my safety, because I felt like if I take it to that level mentally, to where I have to be perfect, I have to be safe, I have to be da-da-da-da. Even if I was in a slower car, I never took it for granted that there was something that could break on the car, or I could catch on fire, or anything like that. So I always like wore all the gear and did all the stuff right. And I think that's a really big part of what helped me develop into the really fast amateur, like national level amateur, like low level pro and this was like 10 years ago. And then I sort of stopped and kind of froze my development because of baseball. And then once I started up again, I felt like, okay, I was still at a level enough where I could jump in and do some races and have and be survivable, not bash into everybody and make a disaster out of myself.
Yeah. Did you ever try to share the passion with any teammates?
Yeah, one dude, I let him drive my MX-5 Cup car, and he over revved it to like 10,000. And yeah, he was a big car guy. He actually had like a CTSV, and really he had it was like leaned on, had like 800 horsepower or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot of guys are car guys, but not a lot of guys see the value in the risk of racing, or I don't know, I guess the next level. A lot of people want to have a fast car, a cool car, a collectible car. There's guys like Verlander who has a bunch of cool cars. But I don't really think that Verlander is going to be like doing a Ferrari Challenge race like this off season. You know what I mean? Scott Dodgers races. I'm completely stewing on the name right now. It's gonna come back. Yeah. There were some baseball guys were really into having cool cars, and maybe even driving cool cars. But in regards to driving on the track, the only guy that I know that's doing any real racing is Scott Kazmir. He's retired now, but he's doing some Ferrari Challenge racing. I know there's been some other guys over the years. I know Robin Yount used to race, and Jeff Russell used to race. He's a pitcher for the Rangers. But for the most part, guys, I think they like golfing, and they like things that are a little bit more chill, and they don't really want to. I guess they don't want to be amped up to the level, or I don't know. Maybe it's the guys don't want to fail. Maybe guys are just a little bit afraid that they're going to look bad, and they don't. I don't know. But it's like I give it more home runs than I'm ever going to lose races. It makes sense. Or I give it more hits, or whatever you want to call it. So, and I'll never be as famous of a race car driver as I was as a baseball player. So in that regard, I think less people will be watching when I do the coolest thing ever that I've ever done. Whenever that happens,
But I mean, in the same sense, though, is you do have that name recognition for baseball, and if someone's like, CJ Wilson in his second, pro career ends up winning the Daytona 24-hour race, you're going to have that cross section of baseball fans to, racing fans.
Yeah, but also there's always going to be those people that are hardcore one or the other. They're going to be like, yeah, but you lost the World Series to this, and it's like, yeah, but maybe if you focused on baseball more, you would have, you would have not given up that home run to that guy or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's always these elements of that. But I think that's part of the social media now. If you're doing something cool, someone's going to criticize you for it at some point. There's going to be a hater or a detractor or whatever. Someone's going to try to cancel you no matter what you want to do. It could be like, hey, I run a really fun tour group, right? And people are going to be like, yeah, well, touring sucks. You know what I mean? So you just have to be willing to absorb all that, and I think that's that type of attitude as a baseball player and that experience as an athlete has made to really go through a huge development process as a racer in a very compressed amount of races, because you develop all the same mental skills, routine, visualization, I'd say note taking and studying and understanding the opponents, understanding the elements and the activity there. That type of stuff was all that stuff I got from baseball, and when I would do both, when I was racing in the off season and going back to baseball, I noticed that I was dealing with a lot less stress on the field because racing was a lot more stressful, if that makes sense. Because it's like there's
totally.
bigger consequences. So when you're like pushing yourself, and this is the hardest thing, you need to go faster through a corner, but you don't know if you need to go 7 miles an hour faster or 3 miles an hour faster. That's where, and you might not have too many chances to do it because the tires get worse every time you go around, right? So that's where the racing experience kind of, and lack thereof, really hurt me as a driver because it didn't ever allow me to really qualify as well as I thought it would. Whereas like I would keep going and going and going, and then I'd keep gaining as I would go. And a lot of the tracks, like you race there for the first time, place like Watkins Glen or something, it's extremely intimidating. And yeah, you might have done it on Forza or whatever a couple times, but it's still not the same thing as going flat through the FLSs in a GT3 Cup car. Like
No.
that's a wholly different experience. And there's no like sighting laps in a golf cart or anything like that. You just go out there and it's like first practice, GT3 Cup car. You know what I mean? And and that is sort of is what it is. But there's a lot of, I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase it. Every sport and every high level activity, whether it's being a surgeon or a painter or, I don't know, like a delivery ICU surgeon or whatever, right? That mentality to be really good at that is the same focus and dedication required to be good at pretty much anything, whether you're a cellist or a tennis player, or a golfer. You have to be like locked in. The ability to lock in allows you to drive a car better, but there's still elements of driving that you still need to learn how to drive to be able to drive, and that's something where all these kids that are shifter cart phenoms and stuff like that, they have an advantage over the guy like me or the guy like Fassbender or Dempsey or whatever that starts as a 30-year-old effectively when they're really racing, or even older. And I think that element of it is the one like mystical thing about sports car racing. But because you just basically sit down the whole time and have to manage your core and your neck, you can be fairly old and still be a really good racer, unlike baseball where you can't really be 55 and be at risk of an opening day start for the Yankees. Like you are 100% not going to start for the Yankees.
I mean, unless you're Nolan Ryan, but
even Nolan Ryan, like that dude retired at 45, 46. So it's like, so even the best of all time still can't go past a certain level. Whereas racing, like the story with Paul Newman is that Paul Newman was racing until he was like 74, 75 years old. He's still ripping Trans Am cars around at Lime Rock or whatever,
Yeah.
So there is some hope, I guess, if you can call it that, for people like me that are late bloomers. And therefore, anybody that loves it, just even if you're a kid and you're like, I'm a young kid, I'm a kick-ass, da-da-da-da, if your career doesn't pan out, like if you have the passion for it, racing is always going to be around. We might be racing electric shopping carts in 20 years, but we're still going to be racing.
Yeah.
So if you still want to race 20 years from now and you're 20 years old and you're not racing yet, like we're still going to be racing. Don't worry.
Exactly.
We will race. But
right.
That's it.
Pitching coach or driving coach? Which one's harder to work with?
Like harder to work with? Like, I think pitching coaches are harder to work with. Because driving coaches have actual data, and it's a lot easier to say, at this marker, you need to hit this brake zone. That's it. The hard thing for me is I haven't really had enough coaching. So I've been trying to like self-coach over the last couple of years, and that's been somewhat difficult. So I really wish I had more resources of time and locality where I could get closer to people that were willing to coach me. But pitching coach wise, I only had a few, like what I would call really quality pitching coach relationships over the years, and I pitched for 16 years professionally and an additional however many years before that, as an amateur. And I really like about 3 of the pitching coaches I had, like 3 total. Whereas like I like almost every coach that I've ever had as a driver, almost all of them have been great over the years. Even guys that maybe don't like each other that I had instruction from both of them, like I liked both of them, because I think that race coaching as long as you're not super condescending, you're there to get input as a driver, whereas pitching, a lot of pitchers don't want to hear it. They don't want, the guy's like, you need to do this. He's like, you do it, go ahead. But the driving coach is like, hey, I just did this, and so you need to do this. And it's like, okay, well, if he's doing it, I need to do it. Same car. So that's where there's some interesting stuff with, with the driver development, because you can't really develop in other sports that way. You can't develop a quarterback with data to that same degree. You can tell them, hey, your 3-step drop needs to be a little bit quicker, and you need to get your eyes up faster. You need to get the ball off faster. You can say that stuff, but that's all like, you can't be as precise to say as in the car, where you can say, okay, how do you want me to relate this to you? Lateral G's, G deceleration, steering input, steering velocity, brake pedal release, like all this stuff. Like, so someone could take it and they could only be able to receive 2 different commands, and you could give them 15 things. They'll get at least 2 of them. Whereas pitching, like, it's very hard to engineer all those conversations into the communication, and you can definitely not do it in live timing like you can with racing. Like, if you have real data, you can go to a driver and say, hey man, you're coasting too much, do this, and we see your data, like, and it doesn't lie.
See, it's like, I see all these pitchers that have so many different releases, and there's pitchers that just focus on a slider, a curve, and a fastball, and then you got other ones that have the breaking ball, the curve ball, the sinker.
Split finger, yeah, exactly. Sinker, yeah.
So it's like I could look at a pitching coach and be like, okay, how are you going to help the 8 different pitchers you have on staff?
Yeah.
Compared to, okay, driving is left, right, gas, brake, and getting all that timing and trying to put it in together to hit the right lap.
Yeah. Other than the always a debacle track limits at COTA. The racetrack is the same shape and speed and size for everybody, right? Yeah. It's the same tarmac for you as it is for me. If I'm in the right lane, you're in the left lane. We both still have to make the same corner. Whereas, like, if I'm 6'4" and you're 5'7", and we're like on a baseball field, then like the field changes for us at that point. You know what I mean? Because it's the relationship of geometric relationship between the pitcher that's this tall throwing the ball downhill versus the guy that's a little shorter on the opposite side throwing the ball flat. The balls come out like, and they both got to go here to the home plate, but they come from like completely different positions. And as a result of that, coaching the lefty versus coaching the righty, some people can't coach lefties. Like, some right-handed pitching coaches just can't do it for whatever reason. They can't wrap their head around the fact that, like, oh, well, the ball comes from like, completely different release angles and crosses over and then does that. So your communication skills and your observation skills have to be so much more advanced as a pitching coach than as a driving coach. Psychologically, as a driving coach, you need to take care of a lot of fragile egos, I think, but because everybody's like, why am I not Fernando Alonso? And it's like, Fernando Alonso's not even Fernando Alonso most of the time. Like, that's the whole problem. So, there's there's a lot better radio chatter with driver to coach than there is conversation manager or pitching coach to pitcher, I guess is what I would say,
Well, CJ, I don't want to take any more of your time. I know you're at work. I really appreciate your time today. I always like to give my guests the time at the end because I know how big partnerships, sponsorships, people that stand by them really is. So this is your time to shout out, thank whoever you need to thank, and just imagine you're standing on the podium at Le Mans after 24 hours.
Well, I've got my victory bear here, right? So I just won my race. I just want to say thanks to Porsche for putting me on the podium here. I get a chance as a dealer now to sell some of the best cars in the world, and every once in a while drive them on the track. And I really enjoy the Porsche product a lot. I've been a frequent purchaser myself, and that's kind of my daily job now. Is I GM the Porsche and Audi store here in Fresno. So if you want a weird color on your super cool car, then you come see me, because I'm your PTS pal. That's the deal.
Well, I know one thing you were famous for was your the color you chose for your P1.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if you're gonna do it, man, just
do it right.
Do it. Go nuts. Like, do something funky. And like when we were at the track day recently, I had the blue Ferrari out there, and like I'm gonna make that available as like a rental car, But I wanted to do blue because it's like how many blue Ferraris are there? There's not many, right? So I think that's kind of part of my deal. So I love the color. I love kind of going for it. I love stripes and wacky stuff. So it's fun for me when customers want to order something custom or try to do something a lot different than the norm. Because at the end, I think a lot of cars, your car is a little bit more valuable if it's more rare in general. So that's a fun process. But thanks for having me on, and I'm gonna just try to sell some cars. That's what I do.
Get those cars sold.
All right.
All right, CJ. Thanks a lot.
Okay, see you.
All right.